Hi again, First Philly, especially Miss Irizarry and Miss Serafin's class. We're here again on a bright Monday, now afternoon. And here we are doing another Miss Allen's Music Room. I apologize for the noise in the background. I have my little laminator going right now because I'm trying to make some posters. So if you hear it in the background, that's what's going on. And yeah, so I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about improvisation. That was what we started on last week, and I want to keep going with it, at least for this next week. And then I want to tell you guys a little bit more about the recording aspect of singing and improvisation and music in general. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a tutorial about how to set up your own little studio. It's pretty easy. All I needed was a few extra things that I didn't already have around my house. So I'm hoping that you guys, if you're interested in continuing on with music, or if maybe you know somebody who's looking to record a certain song that they wrote or a rap that they're going to perform, this will really help with all of that, and it'll mean that you might be able to get some cashola on the side, because actually the job of sound editing and sound recording is very well paid. I think you'd be surprised. And it's mostly because musicians often don't bring additional players with them, or would need to use a studio microphone, or need to use a studio cable for their microphone, or whatever it may be, and that's really where all that money is going. So, last week we talked a little bit about the blues scale, and I tried to record the scale ascending, meaning going up, and descending, meaning coming down. I think I might have to edit that into this video as opposed to taking you over to my piano and just playing it for you, just because the sound will not carry all the way over to my microphone, which is actually right here above me. And it's going to make it sound really echoey and actually have, sorry, something's making a tinkling sound and it's very distracting. And it's still going. I think it might be my voice, actually. Oh, I see here. Well, that's something that we will definitely talk about when we talk about microphones and your setup. So, the blues scale, yes. I recorded it for you on my piano, but then I need to add it into this video after we're done in order to have you guys be able to hear it, because it's just a very quiet audio clip that ended up coming out. In addition to that, we're going to talk a little bit about how you tell a story in an improvisation. And I'm going to show you guys some different styles, maybe other than medium swing like we were discussing last week. This week I'm going to give you guys a little preview of some other styles, and today we're going to start with the bossa nova. Bossa nova is another very famous jazz style. Sorry friends, I have this weird lump in my sweater. But yes, the bossa nova is, I guess that's not going away, another style of jazz, and it's actually usually more a Latin style of playing jazz, and there are a few Latin styles of playing jazz, and we'll probably get to all of those as we go through, because Miss Allen is from a Hispanic country, a Spanish-speaking country. I do really like to connect the idea of Latin music with the idea of jazz music, and there very fortunately is a lot of different crossover between those two things. So, blues scale. I want to start us on a C major blues scale, C being kind of just right in the middle of the keyboard, pretty easy for everyone to sing, and also pretty easy for you to hear the chord changes as we move through our 12-bar blues, which is what we were using last week. where it's 4 measures, then another 4 measures that are different than the first 4, and then it goes back to the beginning for the last 4 measures. So, pardon me. The blues scale, the C major blues scale, has a few different notes in it than the minor blues scale. So the difference between the two is not in the lower half of the scale, which would be the first 3 to 4 notes, but actually up in the higher parts of the scale before you reach the octave C. In the major blues scale, there is the flat third scale degree, like we talked about last time, and then actually, instead of going right to the 4th scale degree, you play the regular note that should be the 3rd scale degree. So it goes in the C major blues scale, C, D, E flat, remember that flat symbol that we talked about last time, then you play E, just regular E, then you skip a few notes. You don't go right to F or to G, you actually go up to the note A and continue on from there. So the notes of your blues scale are C, D, E flat, E, G, A, C. And all of those notes together, when you play them, sound like a major scale. Even though it has the lower 3rd scale degree inside of it, that usually means that the scale would be minor. But in the case of the blues scale, you also have the major scale degree. So it's both of them, and it kind of gives you a little bit more freedom as far as what you want to do when you're vocally improvising. So I'll try to put the clip in here of this is how the C scale sounds. Just want to give myself a little bit of space around it on either side, just in case I accidentally start talking over the sound. So that hopefully you will have just heard is our C major blues scale. And it sounds kind of complicated when you play it all together, but for the time being, I just want you guys to use the first 3 notes. So C, D, and, E flat. When you're doing your solos, because I want to see if you can hear how many times you can play or sing the note C in the course of a 12-bar blues that's in C. It's really a lot of the time, so even if you are a little bit lost for ideas when you're starting a solo, starting with that bass, that first note, what we call the tonic note, that's really fancy and you don't have to worry about it. It's mostly to just make you sound smart at parties that we're talking about it. The tonic note number 1, the first scale degree, can actually pretty much be used throughout the entire song. There's not a lot of chords or underneath accompanying notes that wouldn't also pair well with the note C. And even with just using those 3 notes, you can make beautiful solos. I've heard solos that use just 1 note through the whole solo, and it's longer than a 12-bar blues. Sometimes they go through 2 times of a 12-bar blues, just doing 1 note, but they change up the rhythm, they change up the volume, they change up, what syllable they're singing, if they're singing the song instead of playing it. And there's really a lot to do even with just 1 note. So I don't think that I'm trying to limit you in any way. And actually, I think it's kind of much harder to do an improvisation when you only have 1 note to use, because then you got to figure out like, oh gosh, well, then I'm mostly focusing on the rhythm. So that's what we're going to be doing, is primarily on the very bottom of it focusing on rhythm, but you can also use the scale to help you kind of go through it. So, oh, and I also wanted to tell you about kind of creating a story with your solo. So that's a pretty easy thing to do. It requires the same amount of imagination, say, as trying to figure out Like if someone handed you a blank piece of paper and a pencil, what would you do on that piece of paper? It could really be anything. And it's the same thing in improvisation. Usually, singers, vocalists, will try to imitate or make their voices sound like a certain instrument, because that certain instrument would sound appropriate doing a solo over that song, or they just really like those syllables. And often you can hear if a singer plays an instrument, because when they will vocally improvise, they'll use a lot of the sounds that they'll hear when they're playing their instrument. I'm going to show you a video about that tomorrow that was actually recorded by some pretty famous jazz singers, talking about how to make a story out of an improvisation and to choose what syllables you'd like to sing based on certain instruments that you might hear in jazz music, like trumpet, like saxophone, like upright bass. Kind of looks like a cello, but a lot bigger. And a few other things like that. That's all going to be in our Wednesday lesson. Today, we're just going to talk about, we started talking about the blues scale, and we're going to do a little bit more of that improvisation with just using the first three notes, C, D, and E flat. So, here is